Welcome. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Governor Burgum, for graciously accepting our invitation to come to campus and sharing your perspective with the students of the Upper Valley community. I'm Cooper Hildahl with the Dartmouth Political Union, the preeminent, nonpartisan, student-led political organization here on campus. The DPU has joined the Rockefeller Center to co-sponsor this event series, The Path to the Presidency. Today's program, we have asked Governor Burgum to make some opening remarks and then hold some moderated discussion, followed by questions from the audience. Emma Wolf will be moderating our discussion. Vice President Wolf is the inaugural Vice President of Government and Community Relations here at Dartmouth College. Previously serving as a Senior Advisor for the President, Senior Advisor to President for the External Relations and Leadership Development at Barnard. From 2018 to 2022, she served as Deputy Mayor and Chief of Staff to the Mayor of New York City. Previously, Ms. Wolf served as the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for New York City, overseeing offices at federal, state, and local levels to achieve policy, legislative, and budgetary outcomes. Prior to her time at City Hall, Emma worked in city and state government office, ran electoral campaigns at local, state, and federal levels, and recruited new candidates to run for office, and organized for labor and community-based groups. Ms. Wolf holds a bachelor's degree in urban studies from Barnard College. Our esteemed guest today, Doug Burgum, was raised in tiny Arthur, North Dakota. He's the youngest of 3 siblings. His father died when he was in freshman year in high school, deeply impacting the rest of Burgum's life. After his father's passing, Doug's mother worked while raising him. From her, Doug learned the values of resiliency and work ethic and the importance of family. Burgum worked as a chimney sweep to help pay his way through North Dakota State University, and then earned an MBA from Stanford University. He soon returned to North Dakota, where he always dreamed of growing a business. In 1983, Doug bet on the farm to provide the seed capital for software startup Great Plains. Doug eventually grew Great Plains to create 2,000 jobs, filled with people from over 220 North Dakota towns. Doug also maintained his commitment and connection to his roots through family farm partnerships and serving as a board member for Arthur Companies Incorporated, a diversified agribusiness founded by his grandparents in 1906. He also owns a ranch in western North Dakota. It remains a tradition to take part in cattle roundups and the annual calf branding. Doug won his first term as governor in 2016 and was reelected in a landslide in 2020. Forbes named Burgum America's best entrepreneurial governor, and Wall Street Journal says Doug shows his background as a businessman and entrepreneur. Under his leadership, North Dakota has led the nation in innovation, creating a boom across the energy, agriculture, and technology sectors. In Burgum's first year as governor, he inherited a budget shortfall of $1.7 billion and balanced the budget by reducing spending by 27% without raising taxes. He helped pass term limits, made North Dakota more military and police-friendly, and enacted the largest tax cut in North Dakota history. North Dakota now has the country's 6th highest GDP per capita, ranks among the highest nationally in energy production, and boasts one of the nation's lowest unemployment rates. Burgum has 3 adult children and is married to Kathryn Burgum, now a nationally known advocate for addiction recovery. Please join me in welcoming Please join me in welcoming Governor Doug Burgum in his opening remarks.
Good afternoon. Is that okay? Working? Okay, well, I want to say great introduction. Thank you, Cooper, and thanks to all the members of your organization for hosting today. Thanks to the Rockefeller Center. Grateful to be here. As she was introduced, part of the team, but I'd just like to have her stand, but along with us today, the most courageous First Lady in America, Kathryn Burgum, is here. I say courageous because Kathryn, when I have an opportunity to listen to her speak, I always look at her with awe because Kathryn shares her story of struggling with addiction for 2.5 decades and now has been in recovery for 21 years. And when we first got elected in office, she made that her platform to help eliminate the shame and stigma of addiction. And this is something that you want to talk about, something not bipartisan. Addiction right now, we're losing 300 people a day in our country to overdose deaths. 70% of those are fentanyl deaths, but those are sons, daughters, nieces, and nephews. It doesn't discriminate, what party, what political party, income levels, urban, rural, rich, poor, doesn't matter, anything like that. It just affects everybody. And if we had another issue in our country where if we were losing 300 people a day in an airplane crash, And then we lost 300 the next day and 300 the next day. You know, all of you'd be holding marches on campus. You'd be telling all your friends and grandparents would be calling their grandchildren saying, don't get on a plane until we fix this problem. But when we lose them silently, hidden often by the stigma associated with this disease, which is a brain disease, it just keeps happening. And of course, this is something that's near and dear to us. We've tackled it as one of our priorities in North Dakota, and certainly when you're your president, this will be an issue for us, including stopping the flow of deadly fentanyl into our country. But I'm here today, I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about economy, energy, and national security. Those are the issues that we brought up when we announced our candidacy on June 7th, and these are the things that if you pick up every headline today, whether it's today's that inflation higher than expected, we're in a Cold War with China, we're in a proxy war with Russia, and we're in now a proxy war with Iran. And a lot of these wars have started. You know, we get what's common between Russia and Iran, these two instigators, they both drive all kinds of revenue from the oil industry. Killing the U.S. oil industry is actually, you know, an objective of the Biden administration. We're trying to eliminate liquid fuels in our country. And when you do that, we don't destroy demand. We just are destroying supply. We're destroying the cleanest supply that we have in the world here. And we're replacing it with dirty supply from other places. I mean, and you have to look no further than New Hampshire. New Hampshire, at the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, had the highest percentage of homes heating their homes with heating oil, which is one of the dirtiest fuels to heat a home with. And we were offloading. Were we getting that heating oil from America? No. There's 400,000 barrels of oil a day being offloaded every day at the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, coming from Russia, dirty Russian heating oil offloaded into New England to help heat people's homes. I don't have a problem with people heating their homes. I have a problem with the fact that we've got clean natural gas as close as Pennsylvania, but we've got an administration and we have states like New York that won't permit a pipeline to allow clean natural gas to get to this part of the country. And we see it in California with clean natural gas that could be coming from the Bakken or the Permian. So we've got internal issues that are creating instability in our policies. We've got policies around energy that's destabilizing the grid. All of us in my generation, we grew up with an understanding that if you went to a light switch on the wall and you flipped it on, it was going to work. Many parts of the world don't have that, but that's something that supports industry and manufacturing, keeps prices down. It helps support critical infrastructure like hospitals and schools. But right now we're on a path towards this generation of young people that are here today, you know, that your light switch is going to need a sticker by it that said may or may not work depending on which parties in power. It may or may not work based on what the weather was today, because we're creating a series of policies where we're putting dependence on intermittent sources of energy. So when I talk about energy policy, I'm talking about the whole width of it. And when we talk about economy, we're talking about the things that affect every American, because right now every American is facing bills. The typical family in America is paying about $700 to $800 more per month today than they were when Joe Biden took office, just to put food on the table and gas in their car. I don't know that many people. It's $8,400 a year. If you haven't had an $8,400 increase in pay just to stay even in the last 2.5 years, you're falling further behind. And if you had savings that you'd put away, that you fought your whole life for, to put away some savings so you could retire, inflation is this invisible tax that just reaches into your savings account. And while your balance may say the same number, it actually just grabs that buying power and pulls it out and leaves people in a position where they've got to work longer, work harder, or defer their plans that they might have for themselves or their children. And so inflation, high interest rates, our economy that's crawling, that should be sprinting, these are all things that we need a person with a business background to try to tackle. And when I look across the stage at the debate stage, and I look up down that stage and I go, wow, these are all the people that are supposedly leading. These are all the people that want to lead the country. And I've been involved with more job creation directly than all of them combined. I've been making payroll every 2 weeks since I was in my mid-20s, and there's people on the stage with me that have never made payroll once because they've never led in the private sector. And I don't know how we can expect to have a leader in the White House who's supposed to drive the economy that hasn't had private sector experience. But not just private sector experience in technology, because technology is changing every job, every company, and every industry, and it needs to change government. It hasn't. One of the reasons why when we took office coming in as outsiders in 2016, we were able to cut 27%, $1.7 billion out of our general fund in 4 months and keep every train running on time, was because we knew how to take costs out of a business but improve services, because that's what you have to do in the software business. For 30 years, I was involved in leading and running companies where every day we had to be better, smarter, and faster the next day than we were the day before. That's what we need, not just, oh, I'm a business person that knows how to compete and win on a global scale. People talk about Great Plains. People said it was improbable. I literally bet the farm, as Cooper was talking about. I had 160 acres of farm ground I got from my dad after my dad died, not enough to farm with. But I took that and that became the seed capital. There's no venture capital in North Dakota. Everybody told me you can't build a global software company here. There's no talent. We recruited kids back from all over the country. We built the 2,000 people. We had 1,200 were in Fargo, 400 rest of North America, 400 rest of world. We had customers in 132 countries. I've seen people that have worked for me and had customers work for me that didn't have the right to vote, they didn't have the right to assemble, they didn't have the right to free speech. When you spend your life as a young person working around the globe and you see how great our country is, you develop a love of this country, just like my dad had, who fought in World War II, volunteered after Pearl Harbor, got married to my mom, didn't see her for 2.5 years, amazingly lived to tell about. Because he had a college degree, they made him a naval officer. They put him on a destroyer as fast as they could build them. And it's only by the grace of God I'm here. He was on a destroyer. Destroyers protected the aircraft carriers. There's 151 destroyers at Okinawa. 129 of them were hit by kamikazes. And half of the MIAs in our country, we always associate MIAs with those that didn't come home from Vietnam. There have been 80,000 MIAs in the history of this country. 40,000 of those MIAs are World War II Navy Pacific soldiers whose ships went down and their bodies were never recovered. They never came home. And so I'm here. I've seen what our country can do. I've seen it through my dad's eyes. We were back in Japan last fall on a trade mission. I was looking out at Tokyo Bay and I thought, wow, my dad was here when he was 27 years old on his birthday, September 2nd, watching MacArthur and accept the total surrender of this totalitarian regime. And what did we do as America, the best of America? We stayed and we helped get the Japanese people back on their feet. We helped them write a constitution, create a democracy. They became the second largest economy in the world and our greatest partner. And now we have an administration where U.S. energy policies are putting Japan at risk because we can't even sell U.S. energy to Japan from Alaska because we think that we're better off restricting our supply and them getting it from someone else. And Japan's got 126 million people living in a space, that's the size of 2 Iowas. And they've got to import almost all of their energy every day. And when they can't get it from the U.S., you know what they're doing? They're importing Australian coal and stockpiling it on the ground. Anybody that believes that these environmental policies or the energy policies of the Biden administration are helping the environment, please let's have a discussion about system economics, because it's actually making the world less safe and it's not helping the environment and it's causing inflation at home. So when we talk about economy, energy, and national security, these things are all completely intertwined. And I'm looking forward to having a dialogue with all of you, hear the questions. I just had a chance to meet with a great set of students. Some of them are still here. We didn't get to all the questions, but those that are here, including classmates of mine from the class of 1980 that made their way into the room, Dick and Laura, thank you for coming. It's great to be with all of you. And then one last thing I would just say is hello from Senator John Hoeven. Senator John Hoeven from Minot, North Dakota, graduate of Dartmouth, came here as an undergraduate and has had a fantastic career. Was a great governor in our state for 10 years, a friend of Kathryn and I, he and Mikey, and obviously doing a fantastic job as a U.S. Senator. And something my classmates at Stanford may not know, was mentioned about the chimney sweep. When I was graduating as an undecided senior from NDSU, having never declared a major, the first one to graduate undecided in the history of the school, it was quite an accomplishment. They tried to track me down, you need to declare a major. But I graduated with something they named University Studies. Shortly in the spring before my graduation, I had a professor that was Colonel Winston Wallace, who was also a World War II thing. He gave me an article from Forbes magazine. I'd never seen a Forbes magazine before. The cover article was about MBAs. And he said, hey, if you're undecided, you seem like an entrepreneur, you started this chimney sweep business that's going really well, maybe you should think about going to business school. And I got the magazine right before spring break. 3 of my buddies, Flip, KR and Suddy, and we were going to drive to Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana and ski and try to hit a bunch of resorts in a week. And I thought that would be a good week to fill out all my graduate school applications for business school. as we were driving and skiing. And I thought, well, I didn't know who to apply. There was no internet, so I applied to the 6 schools that are in the article. They were the top 6 schools in the country. And so Harvard, Stanford, Dartmouth, Dartmouth, Virginia, and then Northwestern and Chicago. And I'm sure that I wouldn't have gotten into any of them with the application that I, pulled together at the last second. But I thought, wow, there was an AP article that came out that had a picture of me in top hat and tails on top of a chimney, 20 below, steam pouring out of it. And of course, the minimum wage was about $2.35, then it just gone up. I could get $40 for sweeping a chimney. And I'd answered some penetrating questions for the AP reporter, like, why did you become a chimney sweep? And I said, well, obviously, I was looking for a job where I could move up fast and stay in the black. Okay, I had to have one dad joke. My kids wouldn't forgive me if I didn't throw in at least one. But that's actually in the article. You can find it. So I did, just at the lark at the end, I made a copy on a crude, copy machines in those days, but made a copy of that article, and I put it on top of each of those 6 applications, and I went 6 for 6, getting into those top 6 schools. Apparently, everybody was thrilled to have a chimney sweep as part of their class. And then you say, well, why wouldn't you have picked Dartmouth, this amazing campus? Well, I didn't have the money to go visit any of those campuses. And I had got the brochures, and Harvard came, Dartmouth came, all these came, Chicago, and they all had pictures of people walking past snowdrifts, going to class. And I'm like, I've been doing that my whole life. And then along came the one from Stanford. It was a little bit of false advertising because it had palm trees, but the only palm trees at Stanford were imported for Palm Drive going into the campus. It's actually, they don't really heat their buildings that well. It was very cold that winter. But anyway, I made my decision on which business school to go to, not on Silicon Valley, not on this is where the future economy was going, not on I might have a career in software. It was strictly about palm trees. So I'm just sharing a little bit about myself with the students, that sometimes life will take you places you may not imagine. But the other thing, I've also learned that all the top graduate schools make admissions errors, but if you don't apply, you don't get a chance to be one of those admissions errors. So go ahead and get your applications in. With that, I know that I've got an incredible co-host here that we're going to have a chance to have a dialogue, and so I'm just going to stop there, but let me just close with gratitude. I want to thank all of you for being here today on behalf of Kathryn and myself, because one of the amazing things about New Hampshire is the role that New Hampshire has as the first primary. It is the first in the country, and it's not just a slogan, it's not the name. New Hampshire picks presidents, not pundits, not media, not even these presidential debates, which are really some form of political theater and clickbait material. New Hampshire voters are the ones that pick, and it was certainly a huge moment of pride for us this morning to walk into the State House here and file for application to be on the ballot in the state of New Hampshire. So anyway, thank you for that. Emma?
Mic up here. Sorry for the heavy breathing there. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Governor, thank you so much, and thank you, First Lady. It's great that you're here as well. Here we go. So we're going to open this up for lots of questions from the audience. I'll just ask a few. I'll try not to dominate. I have so many questions. I think your career has been incredibly fascinating, and I can't wait to talk to you about your evolution from the private sector to the public sector. So I'll just ask a few, and then we'll pick from the audience, and there might be some online questions as well. So, Governor, one of the pivotal, the big questions that we always ask in Path to Presidency events, I want to thank also Cooper, DPU, you guys, tremendous, great audience, and this is an exciting moment. So we ask what motivates you in your candidacy to run for President of the United States. I feel like your opening remarks were incredibly helpful in telling us why you're motivated to run for president. I'm very interested in how you made the decision to run for governor, and I'd love for you to talk about the experience of making that decision. You both made that decision. Of making that decision, and a little bit about the experience of entering the race as an underdog, and then what that felt like when you became the head of the state there.
Well, the top headline of why is that when leadership's done right, whether it's the private sector or in the executive branch, leadership done right, you can improve the life of everybody that you work for. We know that we can improve the life of every citizen in the nation if we have the right leadership in the White House. So that's the top level headline.
Yeah.
But this decision, when you're in the private sector and things are going really good and you've got your families thriving and your kids are growing, and I came home and said to Kathryn, hey, I'm thinking about getting in the governor's race.
Yeah.
And when she tells the story, and she said, what?
Yeah.
She said, we have a great life. We have a great life. Why would we do that? I mean, because politics can be pretty ugly these days. And a lot of good people decide not to run because of the cost and the impact on themselves and their family. But I basically didn't get her to agree. In the case of running for governor, I said, look, hey, we're down 60 points in the polls. Nobody knows who we are. We're up against someone who's got 100% name recognition. The primary is 5.5 months away. But let's just give it a good shot, because competition is good. And so we went into that process. They had a state convention about midway through in March. We came in third at this little convention that had 1,500 people, which is like less than 1% of the voters in the primary. But Theodore Roosevelt, who believed in what New Hampshire put into law over 100 years ago, being the first in nature primary, I mean, he's the guy that said, look, it shouldn't be it should be the people that decide who the candidates are through a primary process. They should decide. It shouldn't be pundits, and it shouldn't be political parties and smoke-filled rooms and behind the scenes, and let's create a set of rules which try to narrow the field before you get there. I mean, he was for it. So I'm a guy that actually really believes in power to the people. We're building a presidential library for Theodore Roosevelt in North Dakota at the entrance to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, which is very fun. It's going to be amazing.
Cool.
Opens July 4th, 2026. It's going to be a USA 250 event. Don't miss it. It's going to be incredible.
Awesome.
But anyway, so we said, let's give it a shot. So we went into this thing, got third in the convention in March. In June, we won the primary by 20 points. We went on to win the general election by over 40. And then unlike, we were coming in as an outsider, and unlike some other outsiders that got elected in 16, we got reelected in 2020 by over 40 points. These are the largest margins in the country. And you do that because people understand that we serve everybody. I don't want to be a senator. I don't want to be a cabinet leader. I don't have a book to sell. This is about leadership and about service. And when it's done right, you can really make a difference. And part of how we got there, because like a lot of successful business people, we were doing some philanthropy. And we were doing the philanthropy, and I was like, wow, we're trying to help the little rural school that I worked with. And then I realized, I was like, what's the state putting into this thing? Then we were trying to do some stuff on economic development. Then we were trying to do some stuff, around addiction. In every place we turned, it was like, wow, even the state of North Dakota in education is putting in a couple $2 billion. I mean, who can compete with that? And so we actually decided, wow, maybe we should actually give our time as opposed to just give dollars, because we could leverage the impact. Good government has the biggest impact. It's the biggest, philanthropic thing that you can do is that versus just, giving away some dollars. And so that part also led to it. But it's really out of a heart of service and that we decided to do that. And of course, blessed for my parents who both sort of gave everything, served the country and served their community, and great lesson for us.
Awesome, thank you. When you look back at your time as governor, I was thinking about your first 4 years, but also in particular the experience that you had running the state during the COVID pandemic. What's the thing that surprised you the most as an executive in government as opposed to in the private sector? A big learning curve for you?
Well, I think that one of the things that I saw during COVID is the need for leadership, the need for visible leadership, and the need for common sense to try to really dig into a problem and understand it, and have a whole of government approach, and to stay away from politics at times like that, because there's another example. The different parties had different views of the virus, but the virus affected everybody, independents, Democrats, Republicans, and so you have to sort of take away a political lens and say, hey, we've got it. What's our responsibility? And I think that in that case, we nailed it in North Dakota. I mean, we never put a stay-at-home order in place, But instead of just running around and bragging about, oh, we were wide open, we also understood that we had a unique problem. We had some of the oldest population in the country. The percentage of people over age 65 in North Dakota was higher than any other state that were living in congregate living. And that was quickly identified from that nursing home in Washington State. The first incident, I mean, we lost like half the people died. And every small town in North Dakota has got 100 people living in a nursing home. And I'm like, what's going to happen?
Right.
If we lose all of our grandmothers and grandfathers that are in these things. So we really focused on a vulnerable population protection plan, really focused on that, on protecting them. But at the same time, by that first summer, we had our schools open. Our schools were open the whole next year. We did all the reasonable things to do that. But in the end, we ended up with, we've got among the highest SAT median scores in the country now. We had less learning loss than everybody else. We kept schools and communities going. We kept businesses thriving. And then all the money the federal government threw at us to say, oh, this is what you need to do for healthcare. We actually drove that towards career and technical education. We drove it towards some environmental initiatives. We were able to spend the federal money on stuff to move our state ahead, as opposed to trying to fix the problem we did about crushing the economy with regulation. And so that's why in North Dakota we always say innovation, not regulation, is the solution for any problem.
Yeah. I'm glad you hit on that. If you haven't seen it, there's a pretty viral moment that the governor had where you went into a very, very, very challenging political climate that was challenging literally every executive, city, state, federal at the time, and you gave this impassioned speech, again, during the height of the pandemic, about folks not being political. And whether it was masks or tests or vaccines, people had to put aside their politics. That was not, I can't imagine that was an easy speech to make. I mean, other politicians were not sort of stepping up and figuring out how to do that on both sides of the aisle at the time. It was so politicized. Did you know it was such a big moment when you were going up and delivering it?
It wasn't planned ahead of time. It came as response to a set of repeated questions about the politicization of everything. Whether it was masks or vaccines or whatever. There was always sort of two political views as opposed to a what's the right decision. And we were always trying to stick with, hey, it's not what government says, it's what individuals do, and let's talk about individual responsibility, and let's talk about empathy. Yeah. And it was empathy that drove that emotion. I had just gotten off the phone with a fellow former executive that had been a fellow senior executive at Microsoft together, and they had 2 children, and both of their children were young boys in their 20s. Both of them had cystic fibrosis. Wow. And COVID was like a death sentence in those early days before the vaccine. If you had cystic fibrosis, you catch that, and basically you died. So they were they'd done all this stuff to try to, he was on the national board of cystic fibrosis. They were working on a breakthrough drug, investing billions. They were like right at the edge, but they weren't quite there yet. And then this thing came up, and I was thinking about them because of this idea that you'd get angry at someone for wearing a mask when in their home they might actually be trying to protect their children's lives. Right. And so that was the emotion that was coming through for me. That was personal empathy and personal experience, and I think that's important things to bring to these jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears to talk about President Trump, former President Trump. And who was also a former businessman and says it informed the way he approached his time in office. Can you talk a little bit about how you think you differ from Trump now and how you would approach the presidency, and why you think your viewpoints are so divergent given the fact that your backgrounds as business leaders are so integral to your leadership?
Well, I think when we take a look at business leaders, you have to look at the industries they came from and the companies they built and their business practices. And I think that one thing, myself having done some work in real estate to try to revitalize the core of downtown Fargo, I understand it's a completely different business than, and it varies by market, by city, by wherever. It's a completely different thing than competing on a global basis in software. You've got competition coming from all quarters. Software is not about permits or who you know and let's make a deal. It's about who's got the better product today at the best value. Right. And you've got to make it better tomorrow than it is today at a lower price. And so that mentality of taking cost out and delivering services and then having a relationship with a specific set of customers is super relevant to being a governor or the president, because we have to treat the taxpayers like customers. They're the ones that are paying for everything. And in North Dakota, we get up and we say, they're the customer. Are we listening enough to the customer? What are the listening mechanisms that the cabinet agencies, when we came in, they all had a budgeting process. Nobody had a strategic planning process. I said, okay, well, we're going to have the strategy drive budget, not the other way around.
Yep.
Because if it's all around the budget, if you get a bigger budget, you're a winner. Smaller budget, you're a loser. That's part of what drives government to be bigger and bigger. If people think the way that they're doing it, the way we win is getting a bigger input.
Right.
It's not about a bigger input, it's about better outcomes. So when we had the strategy process, part of it we said, what could you stop doing that no one would care if you stopped doing it? Like, well, nobody's ever asked us that. And then, well, okay, well then give us the list. And it turns out like 20% of what every agency and every team member is doing is some mind-numbing, soul-sucking work that literally adds no value to anyone, but it might be a 30-year-old regulation.
Wow. So it was a morale boost for employees. It wasn't...
Well, wow. Guess what? They went into government because they wanted to make a difference and have purpose in their work. I mean, everybody characterizes government employees as kind of slackers and living on the dole, but they're, highway patrol, game and fish, biologists, public health nurses, they went in it because they want to do something for people. And if you come in as a leader and go, we're going to get all the junk out of your way that's taking the joy out of your job and bring meaning back to what you're doing, and we can lower cost, and we can give you more opportunities to solve customer problems, more customer facing and less paperwork, and let's automate stuff. I mean, I would ask all of you, everybody here has got a smartphone, I'm sure, in this group. And is there anybody in this room that's got an application from the federal government on your phone?
We've got one.
We have one.
We've
Okay.
got a single.
Well, let's talk afterwards because I'd love to know what it is. But I'm just saying there's a missed market opportunity. We've got a nation of people that have got supercomputers in their pocket, and we're not using that platform to help deliver government services in a way that would make sense for people. So I just think, but of course, when we got in, I'm like, wow, do we have any cloud mobile developers? No, everybody's maintaining, legacy systems. Do we have a cyber team? No. Oh, by the way, we just got attacked by North Korea. They're attacking a school near the Canadian border. Why are they in the kids' power school grade system? The North Koreans in North Dakota in a 200-person school district. It's been declassified. I can share it. They were in it because the parents of those kids work for the North Dakota National Guard on a permanent federal mission guarding all the missiles in North Dakota that are pointed at North Korea. So it's like, and then you call the DOD, and I'm a new governor. Hey, can you send the cavalry? Because we're getting attacked by North Korea. They're like, you're on your own. We're short like 10,000 cyber people. So we put now a curriculum, K through 12. Every teacher's got to be trained. Every student's got to be proficient. If you're a fourth grader doing an assignment online, there's a certain level of safety that you need to understand when you're interacting with these things. And we've now, built the strongest cyber team of any state in the nation, and we're helping our neighboring states around. But there's so many issues where we've never had a person run for president before that actually understands how the current economy is actually operating.
Right.
And that represents all kinds of opportunities to actually lower the cost of government and increase services, which goes back to how are you going to balance the budget? Well, how about we take cost out instead of, we don't need more revenue, we need lower costs.
I'll ask one more and then we'll open it up. I was going to ask about some geopolitical dynamics, conflict, Ukraine, China, but obviously the entire world has changed in a matter of days after the atrocities in Israel and what we see playing out now. So I'm interested in your thoughts. I know that you said we're now in a proxy war with Iran, and I think you tweeted out today or yesterday that half measures are no longer good enough. They're half measures. What is something other than a half measure? What is a full measure? And I understand your energy policy, but I'm interested in what you would do right now if you were in the White House.
Well, I'd like to think if I was in the White House right now that this wouldn't be happening because we wouldn't have been pursuing an appeasement approach with Iran, the world's largest, purveyor of state terrorism. We wouldn't have been doing that. We wouldn't have been sending them $10 million this last June when no one reported on it. It was like on page 18. We wouldn't have done this crazy $6 billion, quote, hostage exchange, which is really a workaround to try to reactivate the Obama-Iran nuclear deal, which then moves them closer to a nuclear weapon, which moves everybody else in the Middle East to say they've got to have a nuclear weapon. It's sort of the opposite of nuclear, non-proliferation. It's actually proliferation. And I wouldn't be giving money to a country, Iran, who's providing drones to Russia to fight against the Ukrainians. And it's like, and then we talk about Hamas, and Hezbollah, but those are like the subsidiaries. We have to talk about the parent company. The parent company is the one that's providing the funds. Rule number one, don't negotiate with terrorists. Why are we negotiating with Iran at all? And then the worst of all, it's back to energy. They're all interconnected. Quietly this summer, also unreported, go look at all the oil flow information is available to the public online if you know the right sources. And guess what country has rapidly increased their oil exports this summer, which are supposed to be sanctioned? Iran. So that could mean 25 billion or more in additional revenue to that country. Who's buying it? China's buying a lot of it. China's filling their strategic petroleum stockpile. Our president cut our strategic petroleum stockpile in half before the midterms to help get the price of the gas down at the pump for political reasons. We're doing the exact opposite of what our competitors are. So economy, energy, national security, always interrelated. It's a huge tragedy what's happened. I mean, it's unthinkable. A week ago, could any of us think that we're going to be sitting around talking about babies and grandmothers, being mutilated and murdered? I mean, like, would we ever thought that that's what we'd be talking about? No, I don't think so. And then now here we are, and then people are asking about the response. But we have 25 Americans that have been killed. At least that's what we know of. We have maybe more than that have been kidnapped. We don't know yet. We're still waiting to find out. 150 people they think are kidnapped. And ask my team. We were in a room, and when this hostage deal came out, as someone who's been a former global executive for a high-tech firm, I've traveled to all these countries, some of them which were high-risk countries. We would get briefings before we would go. This is the kidnapping risk. This is where you can go. This is where you can't go. This is going to be your security detail. Don't go on this highway. They're either kidnapping American executives. This was 20 years ago. And now we put a price of any one of you students traveling abroad, any business person, any tourists going across abroad. It's like, are we going to get the journalist back from Russia, from the Wall Street Journal, for less than 1.2 billion? I don't think so. I mean, we just made the world a much more dangerous place by putting a price tag on it. And I said, when this thing happened, the hostage deal weeks ago, I said, good, you want to subsidize hostage taking, you're going to get more of it. 3 weeks later, now we're in a thing where we've got terrorist organizations with American hostages. We can't buy our way out of this.
Thank you. Okay, we will open it up. I'll start with you, and then you,
and if you can shout out your name too, so we know.
Yes, rather than you.
Well, thank you, Governor Burgum, for.
Here's got a mic coming.
Thank you, Governor Burgum, for your remarks, and to DPU and Rocky for hosting. My name is Isaiah. I'm with American Conservation Coalition at Dartmouth, which advocates for limited government solutions to climate issues. One of your major policies in North Dakota has been in advocating for carbon capture there. I'm wondering how voluntary carbon capture might be applied on the national stage, if that's part of your plan as part of energy and environment.
Well, thank you. This is a great question because it's so fun to get the question. I actually think this could be the first time in my entire campaign someone's asked me about this incredibly innovative new thing, but it's a fun thing to talk about because in North Dakota, we put the regulatory, tax, and framework together in connection with our amazing geology to use carbon for both sequestration, but also use it to produce negative carbon liquid fuels. And that's totally possible today. It's happening today. And we've solved the riddle, so to speak. First of all, you have to have the geology. We've got the ability in a layer of geology that's 300 feet thick, 6,000 feet below the ground, that has the ability to store CO2. And how do you do that? You take a gas, you compress it, it becomes a liquid, you pump it down the hole, and it fills this sand formation. And you're saying, well, how does that work? Well, think of like you're at the beach with your kids, your grandkids, and they have a bucket of sand, and then you say, well, can you put anything more in there? No, it's full. And then you take, a quart of water and you pour it into the bucket full of sand, and no sand comes out, but the water stays in, because the water fills up all the spaces in between those sand molecules. In the same way, in this massive formation, we can store 250 billion tons of CO2. That's everything the U.S. can make for the next 50 years, or generate, from our current activity. Of course, it's going down in the U.S. every year, but at current rates, we could store 50 years worth if you can get it there. But of course, you can put it in pipelines and move it. We've been doing that for over 22 years. We've been moving CO2, 42 million tons of it, up to Canada for this. They call it enhanced oil recovery, but it's actually where you can create net carbon negative oil, where you put more CO2 in the ground than the oil comes out, and what the CO2 produces. A company today has got a negative 500 pounds of CO2 per barrel operation going in North Dakota. So it's incredible technology. And we've created we've got one of 2 states that has the ability to got out from underneath the EPA to be able to permit the wells. We've got the pooling for these large storing areas where the landowners participate financially in the storage that's going on underground. We permitted a 50 square mile for CO2 storage last week in North Dakota, and 90% of the landowners had voted yes, they wanted to participate in that. You can't get 90% of people in America to agree on anything. But in North Dakota, multiple times we've had over 90% agreement on these pooling agreements. And then we've also created liability protection, because people say, well, what about the long-term effect? Well, everybody that puts CO2 in the ground, they pay a little bit into an indemnification fund. The state takes long-term responsibility. They're responsible for it while they're injecting, plus 10 years. After that, the state takes over. And why would the state take it over? I think that we're going to find out with the research we're already doing at the university. They're taking carbon and creating fibers as thin as a human hair that can lift a piano. I mean, anybody here that's in school is like, if you had a choice between a steel bike and a carbon fiber bike, I think you know which one would cost more and which one you'd buy if you could afford it, which is the carbon fiber one. Lighter, stronger, faster. And that's what's going into all the new aircraft, this carbon fiber. I mean, it's an amazing technology, and one of the greatest sources of carbon usage in the world right now is building concrete for construction and concrete roads. We could potentially replace all road materials with carbon-based solutions that are strong, would last longer and stronger, wouldn't need the rebar, wouldn't need all this other stuff. And with the CO2 storage capability, we've got over $40 billion of projects that are trying to come to North Dakota right now, including what will be the first carbon neutral pig iron plant maybe in the world, because they're going to build this thing right on top of whatever, and pig iron is the major component of steel, which is a high carbon thing. So how is this all happening? Create a stable tax and regulatory framework, get rid of red tape. Capital arrives, because capital needs to know that they can get paid back over 5 or 10 or 12 or 15 years for these projects to pay out. You create that environment, and guess what? Tens of billions of dollars of capital show up, the innovators show up. It shouldn't be a surprise. It's with somebody who understands how the economy works and how capital flows. It's how you solve it. So we will be the leading state in the country, and we'll do it by actually going the opposite of the federal government. We'll be eliminating red tape, and as opposed to adding red tape on the goal to achieve CO2 reduction.
Maroon shirt, you had a question. Same question, okay.
Same question? Great. Hey, 2 people that are out there.
We've got another maroon shirt in the back that had their hand up before on the way back, and then I'll get you, and then I'll get you.
There's a microphone on the way to the back, and then we'll shoot up here.
Governor Burgum, thank you so much for coming and joining us. It's been really great to hear from you. I'm Tobias Johnson. I'm a senior here at 24 from Oklahoma, and I'll be a Republican primary voter. And to be honest with you, I really like you. You seem like a nice guy. You've done a lot of really great stuff. Everything that you've done in your career in North Dakota and the private sector, super impressive. And that's a common sentiment here among my friends and then family too. I actually texted my grandma. I said, hey, I'm listening to Doug Burgum right now. She said, let me know what you think. I was impressed with him in the debate. He showed a lot of class when everyone else was screaming at each other. Too bad he has no chance to win. So my question is, it's a very crowded field. You have big names in front of you. What's your path to winning the Republican nomination? Well,
first of all, I appreciate the compliment from your grandmother that she thought I was a class act. I'll pass that, tell her thank you and thanks for listening. Some people that watched what they call the political debate are wishing they had 2 hours of their life back because it's, like I said, it's political theater, not a lot of help to the voters versus something like this right here where you're investing your time. But the first thing I have to reject the premise. I mean, from the day I announced, the question that I got from all the national media was, oh, it's a crowded field. Well, both as a governor and from the private sector, what are we talking about? Maximum? We had 12 people apply for the most important job in the world, and some of them are clearly not qualified at any level. They've never, led an operation at scale. They've got no global experience. They haven't, met payroll. They haven't created jobs. They don't know how the economy works. They haven't taken their own capital and put it at risk. That's the other thing. I mean, you can go to work for a company and say, I've got private sector experience. That's very different than being an innovator or an entrepreneur that's actually the engine of how our economy works. And so I just think that should be a requirement, because our success in winning these Cold Wars depends on us solving the economic issues, and to have people that don't have lived experience, it's very hard for me to imagine that they're going to be able to actually understand, what's the right answer or wrong answer on that. So I don't think it's a crowded field. And then here we are, we're You know, we're on the stage with 7 other people, and a couple of them were already ahead of in Iowa and New Hampshire, people that have held national office and have run for president before. And guess what? We're unknown. On July 7th, before July 7th, nobody in this room had ever heard of us. And some people that are, you know, that you're going to go home tonight, you're going to think, Doug who? I mean, we are the least well known in this race. But like you said, people that meet us, they're like, hey, we like that candidate. We like what they have to say. We like their policies. We like their background. We like their experience. We are the most well-liked of any of the candidates, and that's provable by, you can look at the fave-unfaves across all different segments and all different age groups and all different geographies. We are the most liked candidate and the least well-known. As an entrepreneur, I will take that position every day, because if everybody knows who you are and they don't like you, all the money in the world can't change that. But all we need is name recognition. We need all of you to go tell your friends and say, hey, we saw this guy and he actually can win. And so, you know, we're like Ted Lasso, believe. I mean, we're going to, so.
Very good.
So I just say to that, I mean, I would just, you know, tell your grandma to keep watching. I mean, like I said, we registered today for New Hampshire. We're not going away. We will be in Iowa and New Hampshire. The voters get to decide. New Hampshire is going to decide who the next president is. And so we're excited about that. We've only been in this race 3.5 months. We got almost as much time between now and the voting start as when we launched, but we're gaining momentum every day and every week because of people like you that are coming to these events and spreading the word about what we're doing. And we know America loves an underdog, absolutely. And we know the other thing, just factually, that the leaders who actually win in Iowa and New Hampshire, that lead changes multiple times in the last 3 months, and the leader who wins 5 out of 7 times recently wasn't the leader 1 month out, sometimes as recently as 2 weeks out, they weren't the winner. So this race isn't over till the voting happens, and like I said, competition's great. The last thing I'll say about the crowded field is, from the private sector, when I got asked this by the national press first week, you know, like by the 10th time someone said, oh, it's like such a crowded field. I said, in North Dakota, we were posting for the University of North Dakota president, and there's 10,000 universities in America. Only about 120 have over 12,000 students in law school and a med school. And we had 35 people apply, and like none of them were sitting presidents. And I didn't go, oh, it's so crowded. Wow, what are we going to do? We have 35 candidates. I said, no, we should repost. We must have forgot to advertise in the right places. You know, there's days I wonder, like, we should maybe repost. Does everybody know we're actually having an election in 2024? These are the only group that's running. Why aren't there more qualified people running? If we had a stack of super qualified people running, I would have said, Kathryn, let's go back to the private sector. You know, I mean, we're in this in part because of the lack of qualified candidates that actually have the skills to meet the moment of what we're in right now.
We'll do up
Sir,
with your hand
right
in the blue.
there, yep.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, hi, my name's Doug Teschner. I'm a local volunteer with Braver Angels, former Republican state representative. I wonder if you could comment on Governor Spencer Cox from Utah's Disagree Better initiative with the National Governors Association. Does politics have to be this nasty? Is there a way we can get out of this terrible way that people, if I don't agree with you, I think you're evil or stupid? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say Spencer Cox is a good friend of Kathryn and I's. We appreciate everything you're doing. I've had a chance to serve with Governor Chris Sununu the last 6.5 years on Republican Governors Association. I had the honor of leading the Western Governors Association, which is a bipartisan group. I had a chance to lead the IOGC, which is the Interstate Oil and Gas States. That's 23 states. I was chairman of that for 2 years, working with 23 state governors. In general, the collaboration between governors is quite strong. And I think Spencer's initiative on Disagree Better is smart. And I think that, again, we, as neighbors, I've got to call, my neighbor in Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz. We might disagree on certain things around energy, but we totally agree that we need flood protection for our joint communities, and we can stand side by side and make things work. But what's happening where a lot of Americans see the conflict is coming out of Congress, and with I think there's good academic studies that would show with the gerrymandering that's going on that if you've got the highest percentage of safe seats ever, that allows people to, not only allows people to take extreme positions, it forces people to take extreme positions so they don't get primaried from either the further right or the further left. So both parties and both sides are getting more polarized. There are a lot of studies that show that where, before you used to have a crossover in the middle where the most conservative Democrats were more conservative than the most liberal Republicans. Now those words don't even apply. There's a gap in the middle and everybody just throws bombs at each other. or throws insults, throws whatever. But this is why the executive branch election matters more than ever, because we need to elect a president that actually understands that once elected, you serve everyone. Mm-hmm. Once elected, you serve everyone. We've done that in North Dakota with the tribal nations. Mm-hmm. They traditionally have all voted for the other party. We went and campaigned with them. They said, you're not going to win. We said, everybody's saying that. They said, well, you're not going to win because we don't vote for Republicans. And we're like, okay, but we're still going to spend a day here with you, because when we do win, we know that, your kids that are in our schools, you drive on our roads, and we're going to serve everybody. And again, I go back to the margins we won by. We're winning by the largest margins because people understand that we believe the executive branch has a role to serve everybody, to be the uniter, not the divider. Leadership isn't about grievances. It's not about, how I'm a victim. No one would ever pick someone to be a leader if they thought they were the best one at articulating grievances. Leadership is about painting a vision for the future, and we're at the brink of this amazing time in our country because the technological innovation that's coming gives us an opportunity to lift people up like we never have before. I mean, we've done it in the last 20 years. We've lifted almost 1 billion people worldwide out of poverty with American capital markets, American technology, and freedom where that's happened. It's been remarkable what it's done, but that's only the beginning of what we can do. And so your desire to have a better disagreement and Spencer's leadership in that area is absolutely essential, and it's what the executive branch has to. But to make that happen, voters have to get out and vote for someone. We have to get what Spencer and I have both called the exhausted majority, the group in the middle that is basically rejecting politics right now and then not voting. If the exhausted majority wants a different result, they've got to show up and vote for candidates for executive branch roles that are going to be able to help bring that united nation forward.
Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions. We're going to make them quick. I'm supposed to say 1, but there's lots of folks. And I'm going to call on you first because you've been very patient the whole time. And then I'm going to call on you. And then, sadly, we have to end the program. Go ahead.
Hi, the Governor. I hope you're enjoying your time in New Hampshire. My question is, so I know that the average age of a U.S. Senator right now is 65, the oldest it's ever been. So my question to you is, what are your words of wisdom to somebody in generation or in Gen Z on finding the courage to run for office? Because right now I would describe it as pretty ugly. Mm.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here today. And relative to the courage is the right word. I mean, to jump into political office at any age today requires courage because there's an impact on you as an individual and on your family. But you have to understand that again, the risk to you is you have to be willing to take that risk to understand the benefit to others is actually greater than the cost to yourself. And so it's like anybody who served our country, served in the military, served in law enforcement. We have people every day that get up and they say, hey, I'm willing to take a risk that's greater for me personally, but I'm going to bring benefit to the people that I serve. And if you've got that mind and heart of service, you can find yourself there. But again, like I said, your generation is going to live to 100. We need those voices. We need younger voices. We need younger and more diverse voices in terms of who's setting the agenda for us forward. So thanks for being here today, you and all your classmates that came, and grateful that you guys have got the inquisitiveness and a good place to start is to ask questions, the courage to stand up. In a world where the answer to almost anything, not just with the current version, what's coming with AI, the ability to ask great questions is going to become a superpower. Mm-hmm. It's not who knows the most, it's who can ask the best query. Mm-hmm. And I hope that all of you are embracing the opportunity to watch the transformation of industry after industry. That's going to be those that are going to be leading the way are going to be those that are most curious. Not the ones that memorize the most answers, but those who've got the creative powers to keep asking those tough questions.
Thank you. Okay, last one. Do you have the
You
microphone?
can clap, thank you.
Yes, you can, sorry.
And she's an NDSU grad too, so let's give it up for that. Way to go, okay?
There you go. Can we have the microphone? They say that you do so that people who are watching online can capture it.
Okay. Thank you for being here. My name's Roger. I'm from upstate New York. I'm a first-year student here. You mentioned polarization, and I was just wondering what you thought were the biggest collective action problems and solutions that currently apply to our government and how they fit into your plans for energy, economy, and national security.
Well, I think a lot of the polarization that's occurring, some of it's around entitlements, and that goes back to the economy, because we're on a track that's unaffordable for all of you at the next generation. I mean, there's promises that are being made and politicians that refuse to address them. Where we've got a solemn commitment that we have to keep, that everybody that's paid into Social Security, we've got to keep that. But everybody knows that the thing's not actuarially sound now, and if any of you understand the fact that if you're going to all live to be 100 and we don't change these, change the approaches we have, it's going to bankrupt your generation. When we bankrupt your generation, then we have a debt that keeps growing, we have a deficit that keeps growing, and then we think we could finance that by selling our money, by selling our debt. Who's buying our debt? Foreign countries buy our debt because they think that our currency, the reserve currency of the world, is a stronger currency than theirs. The second that they stop doing that, and we're getting dangerously close, because with some of these oil transactions that are occurring between Russia and China, the first time ever that those petro exchanges are happening not in US dollars. That was one of the reasons that we had the strongest currency. If you were selling between two countries and you had the yuan, you had the yen, you had the kroner, and you were selling and buying oil, it got converted into dollars and then back into the other currency. There was never currency risk related to an oil transaction. The price around the world was priced in US dollars. Now the US dollar is being cut out of some of that just in the last year. That should be alarming. The BRIC countries want to create their own reserve currency. That should be alarming. Nobody's talking about this stuff, but all of this has the potential to cause the musical chairs of, don't worry, we're spending more than we're making. I mean, every household has got to balance their budget. Every company has to balance their budget. The federal government, our elected officials, keep perpetrating this falsehood that we can keep doing it and it doesn't matter. And it'll come raining down on your generation. So you guys should be demanding something different. When Social Security was created in the first place, those promises by FDR in the 1930s were promised to people to say, we're going to start paying when you're 62. We've raised it to 65, but we're going to pay you when you're 62. Guess what the average lifespan was? 62. And so it's like, hey, keep paying in this whole life, and then we'll pay it out to the lucky few that actually live beyond that. Well, now we've got an average span of like 78, 81. It keeps climbing. It went down a little bit during COVID, but it's going to skyrocket now when AI starts eliminating disease classes, and it's going to completely bankrupt. So we have to protect everybody that's in the system today, but there has to be an honest discussion. Pick a date. Everybody who's born after, they don't even have to be born yet. Pick people that aren't, we're not discriminating against people that we don't even know who's going to be born, but pick a date. If you're born after 2025, your retirement age is going to be higher. Oh, and by the way, if you're a billionaire, then maybe you don't get Social Security benefits. Work on the edges. Try to work your way towards a solution. But the idea that we're not going to touch it is the politically sound thing to do is so untruthful to the American people. Someone's got to stand up and go, that just doesn't work. And we can actually work, and we should be working with your generation to figure out how to make it happen. But the other thing we need to do is get the economy screaming and growing, because one of the ways you solve the debt and you solve the deficit and you solve the way you pay for all these benefits is have 5% GDP growth instead of 0 or negative, which is what we're heading to with these high interest rates and inflation, because that alone, growth over compounded over time, solves all kinds of stuff. And we can do that if we cut red tape and create the kind of environment we've had in North Dakota. We can do that for the whole country.
Thank you. Okay, so sadly we have to bring this to an end. Governor, I think we could all thank you very, very much. We know you've been campaigning all day long, all week long, for many, many months, and it's not easy, but you brought tremendous energy and empathy and insight to this conversation. And First Lady, thank you so much for coming. We hope you enjoyed your time at Dartmouth and at Rocky. And thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Grateful to all of you. Thank you.